Hey guys, it's Ryan here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're doing our check-in video for the month of October. So let's just jump into it. I don't have too much extra to say, so let's start with what I've been watching. I watched Pacific Rim in the theaters. It was a rerun, and it was great. It was the second time I've seen it in theaters, but it was about the 20th or 30th time that I've seen the movie. It's a movie that I really love. It came out on my 14th birthday. I watched it that weekend that I turned 14. It's the first time and only time that I went to the movie theaters with my grandpa. We were in Mexico, and my parents took us, like me and my sister and my grandpa. He came with us to watch the movie. I don't remember what he said about it, but I'm pretty sure he just didn't know what the fuck was going on. But to me, it was an awesome movie. It was a cool experience. And now that my grandfather has passed, it's something kind of special, even if it's not necessarily very significant, right? So it was nice to see it in theaters. I was basically the only person there. There was one other guy. We talked a bit after the movie. It was pretty awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. Pacific Rim is one of my favorite movies. Watching it in theaters is awesome. I just love the experience, right? Then I've been watching Dan to Dan Season 1. I mean, there's only 2 episodes so far, but another one comes out tomorrow. And I really enjoyed it. I had initially decided that Dan to Dan wasn't for me. I thought it was something that I would not really like. And so I've not watched the anime or read the manga beforehand, right? But my roommate had recently mentioned it, and I remember that it was made by someone that worked under Tatsuki Fujimoto, the guy that did Chainsaw Man, and I decided to give it a go since he was interested, right? And we watched the first episode, and I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal. It was so fun. The thing that attracted me most, besides the really beautiful animation that Science Tower did, is the interest that the characters have in the phenomenon, right? And the phenomenon is a generic word that is used nowadays to refer to paranormal and UFO, UAP, alien related stuff, right? It's kind of a word that encompasses both, because the current understanding of it is more or less that it's possible that supernatural occult stuff and aliens are coming from the same source, right? It's a thing that a lot of people in the UFO community are kind of banding about right now. And because of some recent developments in the US government, we know that UAP and UFOs are real, that they are a thing, and more or less has been confirmed that, there have been crash landings and people have found bodies, right? And this was, it's not me that said that, right? It was a guy that used to work at the CIA, said it on national TV during a hearing that he had with members of our government, right? And so it's real stuff. His name is David Grush. If you guys are interested, you can look him up. He did it, I want to say last year, but everything really started moving in 2017, right? So the fact that this show, Dan to Dan, is so tied to that stuff and is so accurate or kind of aligned with that stuff is really cool to me. It felt really awesome. I identified with Okarun pretty well, at least when he was talking about the alien stuff, right? I don't really understand the other stuff that he's talking about, right? But it's mostly just Japanese collectivism that just doesn't work for me, right? So Dan to Dan is awesome. And then I watched Rebel Ridge. This is basically, someone was like, what if we make Reacher. Preacher's a different thing. What if we make Reacher, but instead of a big white guy, we give it to an awesome black dude? And so they basically condensed the first season of Reacher into a single movie, and then they changed the information a little bit, so it's a bit more topical for something that a black man might kind of experience. And then they just made it into a movie, and it was a really, really good movie. I really like the actor. I think his name is Aaron something, and he's been cast as a Green Lantern recently by James Gunn. So this guy's career seems to be skyrocketing, and I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was great. It was really, really well done. The character is not someone that you can really identify with, but you can understand the struggle that he's going through pretty well. You just kind of don't understand him as a person, the same way that Reacher is kind of unknowable, mysterious, kind of odd. It's almost oh, he's autistic or something, but he's like, you know, maybe you can say he's not. He's just like hyper focused or whatever. And the character in Rebel Ridge is very similar to that, right? But you know, I'm not black, but I'm Hispanic, and even though there's not like 100% overlap, there is a certain level of overlap in some of the experiences that we have, right? And so it felt a bit more serious and Reacher to me watching it. And I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was great. And then a few days ago, I decided to watch Predator. It was really fun. It was the first time I watched it. I liked it better than the first Alien movie. To be fair, you know, when these movies came out, they were phenomenal, amazing, interesting, and so different from anything else, right? At the time, right? As a modern person that has never been, that has no early association with any of these movies, I find these movies to be a bit simple, or kind of like not that special, right? But that's just because I live in a world where entertainment is, especially entertainment in the sci-fi genre, is so much more ahead than it ever was when those movies came out, right? And so I've seen better, more interesting, more modern takes on those kind of same principles, and so it doesn't really appeal to me in the same way that it might have to someone that's, you know, 10 or 15 years older than me, right? And so I don't really judge the movies too harshly, but I don't find them to be great visions of cinema like most people that watched it when they were growing up do, right? But I really enjoyed Predator. I thought it was fun. I really just like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers. And I found that the CGI effects that they used and the physical effects that they made for the movie were really great. So I really enjoyed it. Then, yesterday, I went to watch Wild Robot, and then decided to do a double feature and went to watch My Hero Academia You're Next, which is the fourth movie in the series, on the same day. I had like a 20-something minute break in between them, and I just sat in my car for a bit, and then I got some popcorn for the second movie. So, I will say, The Wild Robot is probably the best animated movie that I've seen this year. I mean, it's either The Wild Robot or Ultraman Rising. And the fact of the matter is that they have very similar stories, right? It's about a person finding a child and having to raise it. And those kind of stories really hit home for me for whatever reason. And although the details behind the characters are slightly different, the concept is ultimately the same. It's about finding purpose and finding growth as a person, as an individual through parenthood, right? And I really liked it. I think The Wild Robot is a bit it's a bit better because I think it hit a bit harder since it doesn't have the trappings of the Ultraman series, right? And so it's a bit more straightforward than Ultraman Rising. And I find that a bit more appealing. It's also a bit different because it focuses on a mother raising a young boy instead of like a father raising a daughter, right? And I feel like fathers raising daughters is a pretty common trope, especially in the last couple years where we had a lot of lone wolf and cub type stories that feature like a male character transporting a young female character. But it's a bit rarer, in my opinion, to see a female character take care of a young male character, right? And so I find The Wild Robot to be a bit more dynamic in that sense, but the animation in Ultraman Rising is a bit more favorable in my opinion. I think I like it a bit more, but The Wild Robot is so beautiful looking. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a wonderful movie, and you know, it pains me a little bit to say this, but it is better than Transformers 1, and it sucks that they came out on the same like kind of set of days and that they are basically competing, because I think that as fans of like science fiction media, there is room for both of these movies, but being stacked against each other makes it so that they both compete, and they can't outcompete stuff that comes out from Disney that really probably isn't all that good, right? Like, and so they kind of end up hurting their chances more than they do enhance themselves in any ways. And so I'm pretty sad about that. But I will say that The Wild Robot is better than Transformers 1. I think it's a bit more broadly appealing, and I think it's a bit better done just because I like the animation in The Wild Robot significantly more than the one in Transformers 1, right? It's just, it wasn't my style. So, yeah, and then when I want to talk about the My Hero Academia movie, I I gotta say that I'm ultimately disappointed by it. I really enjoyed the first two movies. I thought they were great. They fit right into the story. They slotted in between portions of the story, so you could consider them canon with no issues, and some of the information carries on through beyond those movies, so they are canon in the simplest sense. And you can say the same thing about movie 3 and movie 4. The thing is that movie 3 was a bit boring in my opinion. I didn't really find myself all that interested in the secondary character created for the movie. And that kind of carries on to this one, to My Hero Academia You're Next. The problem fundamentally with this movie is that the motivations for the evil characters are highly illogical in the concept of the world that they live in, right? Because if these are mafia families and they have certain abilities that they don't want or that they want to be expanded, in the world of My Hero Academia, there are already ways to deal with that, and characters that are part of our main cast have already done things with those things, or have already had situations in which they had to experience those things, meaning that this mafia family should have access to them, especially if they come from Italy to Japan and they want to take over Japan, right? And so it ends up being kind of weak, right? Because like there's a female character who technically is not evil, but she's associated with the evil characters in the movie. And the whole deal that she has is that she's basically, if Eri and Overhaul had the same power, or like had their powers combined, and she also had like a Rapunzel kind of vibe to her, right? Rapunzel from the Disney movie, right? And so she has a power or a quirk that is really awesome and really meaningful, and it gives other people more powers as long as they're compatible with her. But if she overuses it, she can cause a lot of damage to people and in the world, because her powers just become crazy, right? And so this is just a reworking of Eri and Overhaul. But one of our main characters in the story, Aoyama, whatever his name is, the French kid, had the reverse problem of her. He didn't have a quirk, so his family, who were Frenchies, people from France, were able to contact the evil main guy, right? The one, all for one, right? And so that means that this rich girl should have been able to do the same and done the reverse. She would have been like, hey, can you take my powers away from me? I don't want them. And it should have been pretty easy to do. I mean, she is supposed to be a really rich young lady, right? And her father basically spared no expense. He even found someone that had a special quirk that could work for her, that could work to neutralize hers in order to give her a life. But if you can hire a specific person from across the world, I think you can find all for one and just get him to take your quirk away from you, right? And then he might even do it for free just because he wants it, right? And so that was weak. And the other thing is that the evil characters wanted that girl because she had these special augmenting powers. But like 2 arcs ago, there was a guy that made special drugs that did that. And those special drugs don't have a compatibility issue. So why would they go out of their way to hunt this girl when they could just buy drugs from Overhaul, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And if you think about it even like a little bit, it falls apart. And so what ends up happening is that you don't feel any tension, and you feel disappointed at the storytelling because it's so weak compared to the normal My Hero Academia stuff. And I understand that the My Hero Academia movies are not made by Horikoshi, but like, they're at least sort of made by fans, right? So these fans, or the people that make them, should know these details if they're making movies in the universe that are supposed to slot into the universe. And it's just disappointing, right? And the other thing that I disliked about it was that throughout the whole movie, it felt like Midoriya was sandbagging, which means that he wasn't trying hard enough, because it feels like Midoriya could have handled everyone in this movie by himself with pretty minimal issues. I mean, he's handled worse characters, right? And it just felt like he was just spinning his wheels the whole movie so that all of the other characters could get to do something. And I understand that is maybe necessary because you want to highlight all of the important characters, but maybe make a story that does that well instead of doing this kind of thing where you force Midoriya to hang back and you make it really obvious that that's what's happening, right? I just feel disappointed in the way they handled it. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on that. So let's move on to what I've been reading. I'm not going to do it in any order. Usually I divide it by medium, but I'm not going to bother today. So first of all, we read Conan Battle of the Black Stone #2. I don't have a physical copy with me. My local comic book store had an issue. They haven't gotten them in yet, and hopefully they will today. But if not, I'll just have to wait. Maybe I'll reach out to Titan and ask them if they have extra copies and buy one directly from them if it's not possible to get it from my comic book store. But this issue was good. I have a review for it on my other channel, so please check that out if you're interested. Broadly speaking, it was really enjoyable. You got to see two different Robert E. Howard characters fight and have a really meaningful reason for doing so. It was pretty cool. Then I read a occult detective story. This is a short story. It's called The Isle of the Missing Ships. This is a story that was written by this guy called Seabury Quinn. And Seabury Quinn was a contemporary of Robert E. Howard. He wrote 4 Weird Tales the same way that Robert E. Howard did. And this features a character that has a bunch of stories like Conan does, right? And this character is called Jules de Grandin. And he's an occult detective. Although in this movie, he comes off more of a... it's not really occult stuff at all, actually. It's more like vaguely exotic stuff, right? Like it's not really occult in any way, in my opinion. But it feels a bit different, right? Maybe in the 1920s, this was so exotic and weird and out there that it was a cult for normal people, where in my case, it just feels like, oh, they just went to a different country and they did something weird that's slightly different from what we do here in the States, right? But it was a good introduction to the character, and it almost felt more like a James Bond kind of story, which is pretty cool. I thought that was interesting. Then I read some manga here. So I have a Game of Familia, book 1, and I like this cover, and I actually really love the back cover. I think that this image of this character is beautiful. It's really wonderful. And I like the concept. I just think that it was pretty badly executed. And that's disappointing because Mikoto Yamaguchi is a pretty good writer. He wrote this Bachelor kind of parody, I guess it's like a sex thriller or something like that. It's something kind of dark, pretty sex-based, and it's pretty erotic, I guess you could call it. And he does a really great job at making these characters important and meaningful and valuable, right? But it seems clear that he's not really good at writing fantasy based on how this is handled, and that's really disappointing because I was expecting something really good out of it. And while I did get interesting female characters, a lot of the world building necessary to justify the erotic nature of a lot of the situations that happen was not done well. And so what ends up happening is that you just feel like these characters are being treated in really disgusting ways without any meaningful justification for it, right? Like, it sounds kind of weird to say, but like, if you want to have like a sexed up fantasy world, you have to make it make sense, right? Like, Kushio's Dart makes it make sense because in that world, like, there is a god of sex, and the god of sex directly affects the world by having these whorehouses, right? And so they have this church that's basically a whorehouse, and so Kushio's Dart makes sense in that way, right? In Game of Thrones, the sex up stuff happens because it's like, it's just a medieval world and it's just fucked up, right? And so it's gonna be like that. But Game of Familia did no work at all to justify its sexed up kind of situations. And the problem is that it starts off trying to be like Chain Soldier, where only female characters have the power to do stuff. But then by the end of the book, we notice that there's a lot of male characters that can show up that have the ability to fight these monsters, and they just didn't, because they didn't feel like it. And that makes it really weird, because like, in a medieval setting, it would make sense for men to fight and women not to. And there was no real work done to make it make sense, and that really sucks. So I'm overall disappointed by this. I think I need another issue or two, another volume or two, to decide if I like it or not. But right now, my thoughts on it are that it's just bad. It's disappointing. So that sucks. Then I read Case Study of Vanitas, and I think there's nothing wrong with this story. It's not my taste. I don't really like it. I think the storytelling is fine. The concept is good. The artwork is, broadly speaking, good, but there's a lot of jostling, I think is the word that I'm looking for, of tone. It varies very much a lot throughout the reading experience, and that's something I don't enjoy. If you're gonna have a serious story about a guy that tries to cure vampires, don't put in stupid little jokes every couple of seconds, because it doesn't really help. It just makes me annoyed reading this, right? And I know that this creator is really popular and really well liked. I think they did Pandora Hearts, and I think that's a story that a lot of people appreciate, but it looks like their storytelling style is not for me, and that's disappointing because I've been really looking forward to reading this for a long time, and I like the steampunk aesthetic about it, around it, but it's just not enjoyable to read. I just did not have a good time reading it. So I'm definitely not going to continue this for now. But I think I want to give it another chance. I'll probably just save it for later. And hopefully when I read it in a couple of years, I'll like it better, right? I'll have evolved my taste by that point, and I'll like it significantly better, right? So we'll see if that happens or not. But it is what it is, right? So yeah, then I started reading the Guin Saga. This is Japan's answer to Conan the Barbarian, I guess you could call it, or it's basically just Japanese heroic fantasy. This was published for a long time, and it still is published, but the original writer died, but someone else decided to continue on their legacy, and it's pretty well known in Japan and in some circles that this is really one of the biggest inspirations behind Berserk. A lot of the imagery that you can find in Berserk is directly shown here. And this came out many years before Berserk ever did, right? So it's also interesting because you have this creature character, but it's really unclear if he has a mask that he's wearing that looks like a leopard, or if he literally has a leopard head. And it seems like it's both, depending on how the person looks at them, or that it's actually that he has a leopard head, but he can't actually like explain that it's a mask. I'm not really sure how it works, but it's pretty interesting. The coolest thing, in my opinion, so far, because the storytelling is good, but it's pretty simplistic, right? Because it hasn't really gotten anywhere yet, is the artwork. Like you can see, this character back there looks like someone from Berserk, and he looks like Conan the Barbarian if he had a leopard mask. So it's basically like King from Tekken, right? And I've read about half of the book so far, and broadly speaking, it's pretty enjoyable. It's these two children that are the future rulers of a country that has been ransacked right now, are dealing with being stuck in this dark, depressing forest full of horrors, right? And suddenly they find this leopard man, Guin, and he saves them from these evil attackers that wear these black armor, right? And so these children and Guin now have to work together to get out of the forest. And something happens. They end up being captured by this other kingdom that is in charge, like that has recently destroyed the kingdom the children are from, and now they have to deal with that, right? And so that's as far as I've gotten, and I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's really cool. It's really interesting. The reading experience is pretty simple. It's translated well. Nothing feels out of place or anything like that. But the language used and the way that it tells a story is very slow going and relaxing and kind of simple. And so it feels almost like reading something like in a middle grade level, like something like Percy Jackson almost, right? Like Percy Jackson has a bit more flair to it than this, but like that kind of idea, right? Like if you read something that is significantly below your reading level, but you are still interested in what's happening, it's kind of how I feel reading this. And so it's not necessarily the most satisfying reading experience, but it is enjoyable. So hopefully that makes sense, right? So yeah, then I've been reading some other comics and stuff here. So I'll mention them. I don't have them with me to show you because they're over there in my haul pile. So I'll just mention them briefly. So I have Dick Tracy #5. I read it. This is the end of the first arc, and I'm not going to collect anymore. I like the concept. I enjoy the weirdos in very brightly colored suits, but detective stories are best read collected, and it's kind of hard for me to enjoy reading this month to month because I feel like I have to go back and reread all of the other issues, and at that point I feel like I'll just be bored of it by the end. And so what I'm going to do is just not collect it in singles anymore, wait for it to be collected in a trade, and then read that. However, I might prefer to wait until they finish the whole run and then just collect the collected edition of the run, right? So we'll see how that goes. I read Red Sonja 14. This is probably the best issue of Red Sonja I've read in a while. I really, really liked it. I like the cover a lot as well. And I think I did a review for it already. I can't remember. I think I haven't, actually. But it was pretty good. I really liked it. I read Remote Spaces #4. It was fine. The ending of the story was satisfying, I guess. But the thing is that a lot of the story felt mostly style over substance. It was just an excuse to draw these really interesting creepy robots and like human monster things, right? And it's not bad. I don't hate it or anything, but I just think that the storytelling is pretty weak, and that's disappointing. Also, the last issue was like twice the length of a normal issue, and that just feels like they wanted to make it 4 issues regardless of anything else, when it was easily a 5 or 6 issue story, and that feels disappointing. I'm not really sure what the point of that is, especially because it's not like a treat for the reader, because you still have to pay more for it, and so it comes off as like senseless, right? But it is what it is, I guess. Then I read Thundercats number 8. This was fine. It wasn't particularly bad. It wasn't particularly great. It was just kind of normal. I am looking forward to reading more of it though, so I can't complain. It did introduce a new character called Apex, and that was pretty cool. But there's nothing super duper like impressive about it, right? Then I read DC All In, and this is pretty cool. I actually really enjoyed this. So basically, this is the start of a new initiative. It basically starts you with a new status quo without having to have gone through a crisis. It also introduces the absolute universe, and it tells you how it came to be, and it restarts the idea of the Justice League. So overall, I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was a double-sized issue, and you had like 22 pages of a single story on one side, and then you flipped it and it was a different story, and they both ended in the same point, and I thought that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. And I think the concept of the flip book was incorporated really well. So I can't say anything bad about DC All In. I can't say that I'm going to check out any of the Absolutes series, because even though I'm really interested in Wonder Woman specifically, I don't want to pay $5 for it. I think that it doesn't make sense to charge $5 for books, and although I'm willing to pay $5 for books that I've already tried out, I don't think that I want to start paying more, like $5 for a new series that I can just wait for a trade for. Because, like, if this was a indie publisher, I would buy it, because indie publishers might not even bother finishing or collecting the story into a trade, right? But I know that DC is going to, and I'm sure that they'll do like some sort of absolute edition or a deluxe edition or whatever for the run when it eventually finishes, right? At least for the first story arc. And so there's really no reason for me to pick up the singles that I'm gonna have to pay a lot for, when I can just wait like at least 6 or 7 months, which is not that long, and I'll just be able to collect the trade for it, right? Especially because I'm just not sure that I will enjoy them anyways. So I don't know. Maybe that's a weird justification, because I'm saying that I don't want to pick up Absolute Wonder Woman because it costs $5, but I am picking up Wonder Woman because it's by Tom King or whatever. But I think Daniel Sampier's artwork is amazing. I am deeply interested in the main Wonder Woman character in general, and I've already been collecting this for a while. So it's just like I know that I'm going to enjoy what I get, even if it's not necessarily my favorite story ever. I will be entertained by it, and I will enjoy collecting it. I can't say the same for something I haven't started collecting yet, right? So maybe that doesn't make too much sense, but it is what it is. Overall, DC All In was pretty good. Then I read Mighty Morphin Power Rangers versus Usagi Yojimbo. This is a pretty cool story. I actually really enjoyed the chibi artwork that they did for this story. I thought it was really fun and enjoyable. Although I saw some other people didn't like it that much, I thought it was good. It reminded me of cartoons, and I really enjoyed that. Then I read My Adventures with Superman number 5. This is pretty good. I enjoyed this. Not much to say about it. I just want it to be over so I can finish reading it all and read the whole thing in one go, because I think that would be much better, right? Yeah. Then I did Transformers number 13. I like the start of this new arc. It's basically telling us the origin story of Starscream, and I thought that was really cool. I think the artwork here is a bit less enjoyable than the previous two artists. And it does feel like they were like, okay, we got to start with Daniel Warren Johnson. He's going to be the most odd, like kind of out there stylized version of the characters. And then we'll have George Corona, and he'll kind of like simplify them a bit more so they look more generic. And then we have Jason, I can't remember his last name, Jason something. And he'll do these characters that look more or less like in line with like what anyone would think the Transformers look like. There's nothing particularly impressive about the way that these Transformers are drawn, but there's nothing completely bad about the way that they're drawn. It's pretty generic. It's enjoyable and it looks good, but compared to the previous two art styles, it feels kind of basic, if that makes sense. And it's not bad. I'm not complaining necessarily, but I am mentioning the fact because I think it's important to kind of notice this transition, especially because it's so clear. They were like, okay, hyper stylized, and then kind of transition it over to something normal. And I don't know if that bodes well or not. I'm not really sure. I would have liked to see someone with a bit more stylizing come in, but I'm not really sure that there exists anyone that really could do justice or keep up and be different enough from both Jorge Corona and Daniel Warren Johnson, but also not be so out there that it didn't really feel like it matched, right? So maybe it's just hard to find someone. So I don't know. Then I read some comic books by Mike Hoffman. So I read Mike Hoffman's Eerie with a Y. This is a kind of an homage to Eerie, the Warren magazine, or the EC magazine. I can't remember who did it. And then I read his first Inksplosion, which is just an art book, and it was really, really good. I like Mike Hoffman's drawing ability. I don't necessarily know that his storytelling ability is all that good, but he draws really good stuff. So I also read Thor, the Rock Warrior, Book 2, Beast Women from the Center of the Earth, and Island of the Tiki Goddess. And this one was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. It was basically like the first time that Tarzan goes to Opar and he meets Slaw. That's basically what this story was. It was a rehash of that, but you had like a Thor character show up instead of Tarzan. That was cool. Island of the Tiki Goddess. I was expecting some Tiki Goddesses, and I got an H.G. Wells adaptation, and that's really disappointing. Thank God I only paid like $1 for this. Otherwise, I would have been pretty upset. But this just sounds like Mike Hoffman was trying to make a quick buck without having to put any effort into it, and I don't like that. I don't think that's good. So yeah, that's it for Mike Hoffman comics. Then I read Penthouse. Then I read Penthouse number 4. Number 5 came out today, but I had forgotten to read this, and I hadn't reviewed it, so I did it really quickly last week, and I got some comments about it. Someone really didn't enjoy my video, but it is what it is. It just kind of happens, right? But it was just fine. I think this is probably the best issue because most of the stories are to the point where they're interesting now instead of just building up stuff. And some of them ended, and they ended up being pretty good at the ending. But I can't say that I loved it. I think I have a lot of issues with Penthouse, and I hope that next year they change up the format a little bit and make it better. Because right now, I find that the lack of diversity between the stories is pretty boring. And I don't mean like political diversity. I mean like genre diversity. Like all of these stories are generic noir type stories, right? Or like people versus police type stories, right? Stuff like that. And that's fine, and it makes sense because that's an easy way to make like sexy situations happen. But I want sci-fi stories. I want fantasy stories. I want things like that. I want things that are much more genre related that feel like they should be in here, because half of the time the covers are genre covers, right? They are fantasy and fiction type covers, science fiction type covers, and unless they start putting some science fiction and fantasy in here, it just means that they're lying, and that's not good. I don't like that. I don't think that Penthouse should be doing that. Like, it sounds like they're just not caring about the customers, and I don't like that. So yeah, that's it for that, I guess. So let's see, what else did I read? I read Uncrowned, Cradle number 7. Really, really enjoyable. Right now I'm reading through Winter Steel. I wasn't supposed to read that this month, but I couldn't help myself. I was bored during class one day, and I opened up my Kindle app, and it was right there, so I just started reading it. And man, it's great. I really, really enjoy reading through Cradle. So yeah, I guess that's it. I was trying to think of other things that I've been reading that I didn't write down yet, because I only write down what I finish reading. So let's see. I started reading Beast Shifter. That's book 1 in the Primal Talisman series by Dante King. I really enjoyed some of his earlier work when he started coming out, right? He kind of started, well, no, that's not true. He had been publishing a while when I started my YouTube channel, but he had started basically what turned out to be his most successful series while I was reading, or while I was starting my YouTube channel. It's called Creation Mage, And then from there, he kind of exploded. He became pretty big and popular. And I think that his writing style was generally pretty good, but people have accused him of being a content farm. I don't necessarily think that there's anything bad about being a content farm. Like, if you're an author that's selling pretty cheap, pretty basic books just for entertainment value, like they did in the pulps, it doesn't really make too much of a difference, right? Like, some of the most classic American entertainment spec fic kind of stories are in the same vein, right? Like Kenneth Robert isn't a real person, right? It was just a bunch of different authors writing for the Doc Savage books, right? A lot of people wrote for Zorro. A lot of people wrote for a bunch of different series, right? A lot of Westerns were written by like a bunch of people under a house name, right? Like, that's not a problem. The problem that I kind of find is that there is a lack of consistency across some of these series, and specifically in Primal Talisman. Although I'm enjoying what's happening, it feels very lowbrow. Like, it's supposed to be, right? The Haremlit is not supposed to be like, or is usually treated as pretty lowbrow entertainment. It's just for the sake of being entertained with male-oriented romance, right? It's not that big a deal. But the problem is that compared to some of his other writing, or maybe better said, compared to some of the other fiction that I've read under the Dante King name, it feels like they're not even trying. And that sucks, because I paid money for this, right? I want it to be enjoyable, and that requires a certain level of writing ability that has not been shown, right? So, yeah, let me see. Is there anything else? I think not. I think that's it. So, yeah, I think that's it for today's check-in video. I don't know. I've been feeling kind of weird lately about recording, so maybe I need a bit of a break, but I've already had some for quite a while, so I don't know. Maybe I just need to get back into the swing of things. So I'll try my best to make sure that this is edited down a bit better, and so it doesn't come off all that weird, but it is what it is. So I'll see you guys in the next video. So, bye.